I grew up in a Christian household, Presbyterian, was baptized as a kid, but I'm not sure that I had really taken Jesus into my heart at that time. So I really consider myself being saved in about 2009, not even as a result of this. My husband was just like, hey, I need to start going back to church, because he had been like truly deeply saved as a kid. And so I'm like, I'll support you. We'll go back to church. I'll support you. And then God just met me on a hay bale in a cowboy church in Texas. And that was in 2009. And then when we actually were about to go to trial in 2014, I remember one day our little 1.5-year-old daughter is asleep in the car. They always fall asleep in the car. And so we're sitting in front of our house just having a conversation while she's sleeping in the back. And I was like, I guess we just kind of have a choice here. And I feel like God has selected us for something extraordinary. And so we can either go about this like we have been selected for something extraordinary and be leaders and be part of God's army in this. I said, or, we could just like grit our teeth and white knuckle it and, just try to, hole up in a ball and just try to survive. And I was like, I don't want to just survive. I want to be the person that God wants us to be through this situation because something good is going to come from it, and we don't know when.
Fire and water me, going down deep, sing, oh, oh, bury me, carry me, oh, oh, far beneath, oh, oh, fire and water me, watching me clean, guaranteed free, yeah. Oh, guaranteed free, down to the river. Down to the river.
Hey everybody, we are out here in the beautiful free state of Florida at Brawler Creek Ranch, which is owned by our boy Mike Dragage. He's a brother in Christ. He's a veteran. He has this unbelievable facility and a nonprofit to also work in partnership with it, where they take guys who are suffering from PTS and all sorts of life experiences. They bring them out here to the ranch. They bring them on a knife kill only gator hunt, talk to them about Jesus. I mean, just what a blessing to be out here today, huh?
For sure. For sure.
Why don't you tell everyone who you are?
Yeah, my name is Greg. I'm a pastor at the Church of 1122, where I lead our prison campuses and first responder ministry, and it's just an honor to be out here.
So we met Mike through 1122, and it's funny how God just opens all sorts of doors when you go all in and you commit your life to Him. And one of those doors that opened up is my friend who came all the way out here today for this interview. This show is all about God's hand in law enforcement and law and order, right? And things have happened in history that are legal and that the court system has made decisions on, but legality and constitutionality and morals and ethics and faith aren't always in alignment. And I think that's where we are challenged as Christians to make sure that we are standing firm in our biblical values. That's why my boy, Pastor Greg, even when it's super uncomfortable and he makes me mad, he calls me out and holds me to proper theology and to, I think it's important to have someone who's always willing to set that standard. And so today we're going to dive into a story about right and wrong, good versus evil. So why don't you tell everyone who you are?
So my name is Christin Slough. Like you said, I'm from Texas. I was like, did you pick Pastor Greg because of the prison ministry?
But I did wear my Texas boots for you.
Yes, I love that.
Just in honor of you.
I wore my tennis shoes. I'm like, they're going to be on camera. I did not expect them to be on camera, but okay. Well, I'm Christin, and I am one of the wives of the guys that were described as having committed the Blackwater massacre back in 2007. And a lot of people really feel like they know what happened there. They're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Those guys, in Iraq, they went and shot up that place. And, sadly, what happened is completely different than what the government made out to be over the course of, 13 years until they were actually eventually pardoned by President Trump in December of 2020 at the end of his first term, because he is a right and wrong kind of guy. And so that's who we are. So my husband went to prison for 6 years. He had received a 30-year sentence, and I spent those 6 years just calling out to God. We all did. and finding the right connections until we could get those pardons done. That was a really wild experience.
No doubt. Well, I'll tell you, you're absolutely right about President Trump being a guy who, black and white, right and wrong, right? He brought in our friend Ed Martin, who is an amazing man of faith.
Just got to
and
meet
a
him.
believer. Ed's great, man. And his entire mission is to weed through good versus evil and right versus wrong and help advise President Trump on who should receive pardons and who shouldn't. Ed's a absolutely great guy. And I just want to interject for a second here. So we are on an active ranch, right? So you will probably hear background noises, animals, cooings. You may see some gators cross by the screen.
I heard there's a cat that might jump on me.
There is.
A couple maybe.
And so anyway, so let's talk about, let's go to the very beginning of the story and, kick us off from the top.
So the beginning of our story, my husband and I, is probably the most interesting place to start. We got married in 2004, and when I married him, we were both in college. We were gonna, he was gonna get his law degree. I was gonna get my master's degree in psychology. We were gonna move to Dallas. We were gonna have like a white picket fence and 2.5 kids. And he got deployed while we came back from our honeymoon to deployment orders. I actually thought it was his friends playing a joke on us. I was like, there's no way. And yes way. He was gone like 6 weeks later for a year and a half, the first year and a half of our marriage. And so we just went from the frying pan straight into the fire. I had the most normal life you could ever imagine growing up until I married this man, and then everything went completely crazy. I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas, little gifted and talented club, just suburb life. And after he had his year and a half deployment with the National Guard, he really felt called to the mission in Iraq and in Afghanistan and like what was happening over there, and really believed like we have to fight them over there so we don't fight them over here, which was the messaging at the time to our young people. When he came back from his deployments with the National Guard, he was kind of lost and went to a veterans career fair and went by a booth for a company called Blackwater. And Blackwater was providing diplomatic security for the Department of State in Iraq. And so he was going to be doing for them basically what he had been doing with the National Guard, which was convoy support, security, all of that kind of stuff, which was what Blackwater was doing for Department of State. So instead of re-upping, for years and years with the military, you can sign year-long contracts with Blackwater. You deploy for 90 days, you've got 30 days R&R. The situation was way better than deploying with the National Guard or with the Army. And so he went over with Blackwater, and a year into that, this whole incident took place. And it's really wild because, the book is the best place to go for like the actual incident itself and the politics surrounding it because it's so detailed. But the day in question here was a normal day at the office for this team for the most part, because he was on a quick reaction team. And I mean, there were like 180 bombings a day in this area during this time in Iraq at the height of 2007. And so they had kind of what he would describe as a normal day at the office. There was a USA diplomat that had been bombed on venue. And so their team was sent out to close down a traffic circle so they could come back to the green zone. And when they were out there, they took a secondary attack, pretty textbook, but the politics surrounding it turned it into something that it absolutely wasn't, because they were negotiating something called the Status of Forces Agreement at the time. And there was legal wrangling over who had jurisdiction over civilians in Iraq. And the Iraqi government was saying, it's us. And the American government was saying, it can't be y'all, because nobody will work for us if they're subject to Sharia law in your country. And so when this happened, they turned it into this whole political thing because the Iraqi government needed a test case to try to push through their own jurisdiction. And then the American government was basically like, okay, you can't do that, but we'll get convictions in the U.S. We'll show you that we can get a conviction in the U.S. And there was never an option to have a fair trial, because a fair trial wasn't what anybody was looking for. They were looking to make sure that they could show the Iraqi government that they could get a conviction in the U.S. and retain, retain jurisdiction over civilians in their country. And so all of that is in here, and it's far more in depth and far more detailed. I mean, we showed up in like Hillary's WikiLeaks and stuff. I mean, like, our life has been bananas. But it turned out to be one of those things where the legal wrangling took many years. So the actual incident itself happened in 2007, and they didn't actually go to trial until 2014. There was 7 full years of us just letting all the powers that be just wrangle, because for first 2 years, the case was dismissed. So it took 2 years, but the case was completely and utterly dismissed by a federal judge. He wrote a 90-page opinion on it, scathing about the constitutional rights violations, recklessness of the prosecution. He said, you can't unmix Kool-Aid. He's like, don't even bother trying to appeal this. But they did because they had to. And so they kept appealing it, and just before the statute of limitations ran out for manslaughter, they got a federal judge to overturn it and take them to trial 7 years after the fact in front of a civilian jury in Washington, D.C.
How is this not double jeopardy?
Okay, so because it was dismissed originally over evidentiary issues. And so what the judge said was like, hey, you can't use the protected statements that you make in an after action report. You can't use those protected statements to create a criminal prosecution. And they did, because they had absolutely no case without it. They did not know what happened. The investigation that they received was from the Iraqi National Police. Like, give me a break. The Colonel Ferris, this guy that performed this investigation, came with like a Jaish al-Mahdi ring on his hand to court in the United States. I mean, it was just so flagrant and in our faces. But it was dismissed not because the judge said, oh, hey, everybody's innocent. He said, hey, the case you brought me is irreparably harmed. Like, you can't do anything with this. And
Fruit from the poison tree.
Absolutely. That is absolutely the case. And so then Vice President Joe Biden goes to Iraq 10 days after the case is dismissed and says, hey, this is an acquittal. Basically, it's a technicality, and we're going to get your convictions.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So we did. We went to trial in May, or started in May of 2014, years later. And the trial was about 4 months. We lived in D.C. It was in front of a civilian jury, not a single combat veteran on the entire jury panel. And I don't know if you've ever, or anybody in the audience has had the opportunity to just go sit in a courtroom and listen to some of these cases, but it was jarring. Like, we went into that situation believing that, okay, it's all right, because once we get in front of a jury, then the facts come out, a jury of your peers is going to look at it and be like, oh, okay, obviously we're going to acquit. And that is just not the system that we find ourselves in. And I think a lot of us were really shocked to see what happened to President Trump when he was campaigning through this last 4 years. And people are now more open and understanding to the fact that our justice system has been weaponized against Americans to achieve political agendas for many, many years. And the reason that they had the boldness to do that to somebody like President Trump is because they did it to people like my husband before and got away with it.
I mean, I'm going to say something kind of controversial here, and people are going to be torn.
You're going to do that?
Does that surprise anybody? Look at what happened to Alex Jones. Now, people could believe what they want about him as a person, about him politically, about him ethically, morally. I respect every perspective there is. However, he was not allowed to make a case for himself.
Yeah.
He was not allowed to present evidence. And so you might completely hate the guy, but if you believe in our Constitution and you believe in the right to a trial and a jury of your peers and the right to a fair trial, then you have to look at what happened in your husband's case, what happened in President Trump's case, what happened in Alex Jones's case, and say, that's not a fair trial.
That's not.
That is not what our country was founded on. Right. And it's very scary that people will negotiate on constitutional values based on their political perspectives.
Yeah, and we experienced that with our judge. I mean, there was a point in time where, I mean, we argued venue, we argued jurisdiction, we argued many different things. And the statute, the way it's written, is that there actually wasn't any jurisdiction over civilians that worked for the Department of State, because legally they have something called MAJA, the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act, and it covers DOD and DOD contractors. It doesn't actually, because the way the law is written is super important. There's the spirit of the law, and then there's the letter of the law. And the letter of the law did not include contractors who weren't there with the Department of Defense, and they were with the Department of State. And so when they were arguing this jurisdiction, the judge says, well, if I believed this statute, he's like, if I believed this, then I'd have to let y'all go. And it's the letter of the law as clarified by like Gordon England, like the former like Department of Defense guy. So anyways, it was really one of those things where, I mean, the judge was super political when they realized that the government had dismissed its case against this guy right here, Nick. They dismissed their own case against him for a lack of evidence. And then the federal judge dismissed the case against the rest of them later. And so that 7-year statute of limitations for manslaughter was about to run out. They get their case back, they get somebody to overturn it, and so they're going to come back with a new case, and they realize, oh no, we're outside of the 7 years for Nick because of when his original charges were dropped. And so they went to him and they said, you can either waive your rights, your constitutional rights to the the statute of limitations, or we're going to charge you with first-degree murder. They had no new evidence. They had absolutely nothing new. And he was like, absolutely not. I'm not going to waive my rights. That's insane. Why would I do such a thing? And so they did. They completely changed their entire prosecutorial theory over 6 years since the event took place, just months before trial, so that they could charge him with first-degree murder, and got a conviction for it. For a shot he was physically unable to make. He was the DDM, the designated defensive marksman, so he was the sniper in their vehicle. And the weapon that he had could not have made the shot that they said that he made. As a matter of fact, they knew that he didn't. And it didn't matter. Like, it didn't matter when your defense team is fighting with their both hands tied behind their backs in front of a judge who was a JAG prosecutor in the Miley massacre. And so he came into this situation with a conclusion in mind, and they were getting there. And after 4 months of trial, the jury starts to deliberate. They deliberated for 8 weeks because he would not let them hang. They kept sending notes. They're like, what do we do if we can't come to an agreement? What do we do? He's like, I'm not hearing this case again. And so he let these people, these jurors, 6 months they've been here now, 4 months of trial. They deliberated for 8 weeks, and they finally just, I think it's the people who were holding out, who saw right and wrong, just had to acquiesce. They had to get back to life. Like, I don't even blame them. I was so mad at first. I was like, why would they give up? It's my husband, this is my family. And like, but they have families too, you know? And the judge was completely unfair, and they weren't gonna get to go home until they came up with the verdict he wanted.
How did your faith guide you through this as a wife?
So that's a really long story too. So in 2007, when this happened, like, I grew up in a Christian household, Presbyterian, you know, was baptized as a kid, but I'm not sure that I had really taken Jesus into my heart at that time. So I really consider myself being saved in about 2009, not even as a result of this. My husband was just like, hey, I need to start going back to church, you know, because he had been like truly deeply saved as a kid. And so I'm like, I'll support you. We'll go back to church. I'll support you. And then God just met me on a hay bale in a cowboy church in Texas. And that was in 2009. And then when we actually were about to go to trial in 2014, I remember one day our little 1.5-year-old daughter is asleep in the car. They always fall asleep in the car. And so we're sitting in front of our house just having a conversation while she's sleeping in the back. And I was like, I guess we just kind of have a choice here. And I feel like God has selected us for something extraordinary. And so we can either go about this like we have been selected for something extraordinary and be leaders and be part of God's army in this. I said, or, you know, we could just like grit our teeth and white knuckle it and, you know, just try to, you know, hole up in a ball and just try to survive. And I was like, I don't want to just survive. You know, I want to be the person that God wants us to be through this situation, because something good is going to come from it, and we don't know when. And you know, I'm still figuring out, like, where's the impact, right? Like, where's my next role? Where's my next career move? Where do I take everything that happened and help people out? Like, I've got my buckets of water, Lord. Let's go back. So I remember that conversation very clearly, and I mean, Paul, my husband, had to just cling to the Lord. I mean, you know, like, people find God in prison. He is close to the brokenhearted. And I remember on the day of his conviction, it was like a rainy day in DC. By the time we got to the courthouse, it was completely packed. There were so many people in there, like I couldn't even get in. And I'm, working with this awful bailiff, and I'm like, hey, like I'm one of the defendant's wives, like I kind of need to be in there. And he's kind of rolling his eyes at me and, kind of reaches in and asks, he's like, oh, is there anybody here who could, go out in the, in the overflow so that, this woman can come in. I was like, no, I need two of y'all. I need two of y'all to leave because my mother's with me. And so I kind of kicked two people out. And so I go in there, and the very first charge that they read is Nick's first-degree murder. It was the absolute hardest charge to prove. They didn't prove it at all. And when they said guilty, I was like, every last count. And there was 31 counts of manslaughter and attempted manslaughter because they ran TV ads looking for victims. Like, have you been injured by vaginal mesh or whatever, like the lawyer commercials, they put those on the television, and everybody knew that if you were a victim in one of these situations, you're getting a check. So, they had alleged victims that they could not prove were even there that day. People like didn't show up at home. It was like clean out the morgue day at Baghdad, General Hospital. It was wild. And so I was on the day of his conviction, and I walk in and they read off all these counts, and it's kind of a blur between when they said Nick's first charge was guilty and when they handed me a box with all of their belts and shoelaces and wallets, and that was what I had. And our lawyers were just distraught. They were distraught, and they really, besides, save it for the appeal, right, had nothing to offer me. They were just like, we're so sorry. And I'm just standing there with my box of shoelaces like, okay, what do I do now? I was in the shower that night, and it was like the first time that God spoke to me. Like, we have our small, still inner voice and the spirit that rises up within us and leads us and guides us. But I was sobbing in the shower, and I was so mad, and I was like, you said it would be okay. And he just said, I didn't say when. And I was like, okay. And so he taught me submission and held us close. Held us so close. And I look back at the years that I just cared for our daughter. My husband was gone from the time my daughter was 1.5 to 8. And so every Friday we drive 3 hours up to Oklahoma, 3-hour prison room visit, 3 hours back, because our family is so important. He's a wonderful father. He deserved to be, so many. It's, sad, the fatherlessness in our country and the people who don't want to be involved with their children. And there's nothing more that he wanted than was to raise his daughter. And so we really sacrificed a lot and made that happen. And God just held us close. And that the peace that surpasses all understanding, sometimes you even feel guilty for having joy when you're in such a terrible situation. But God covers that, and he provides for that. And the actual covering of prayer, the people calling out our names. I believe that because I couldn't even pray for myself for a while. I just had to pray for other people because it was just redundant at that point. It's God, it's me again. This is kind of an untenable situation. What are we doing here? And it was other people's prayers for us at that time that carried us through, because I had run out of words for myself. So it was an incredible experience, and I don't regret any of it because of the depth and richness of our lives and the depth and richness of our relationship with Christ and the deep knowingness of it. You can be kind of a conceptual Christian who thinks you believe, and then you can be the type that there is a deep knowing and communication and relationship. And that's what I got out of this, was a real, genuine relationship with Christ instead of a theoretical one.
You mentioned something, sorry, real quick. You said, I'm trying to figure out what comes out of this, right? And where we go from here. I think your very presence on this show with this audience is going to have an impact that you will never know.
For sure.
Because there are millions of people who see this content, and that among those people, there are individuals right now who are struggling in exactly the same or a very similar boat. And they are lost, and they are looking for answers, and they're looking for hope, and they're looking for faith, and they're looking for light, and they might not even know that they're looking for Jesus, but they are.
They are.
And your testimony, our pastor, our lead pastor always says, you never know what hangs in the balance, right? We will never know what could have been. But if this story impacts just one single person and lets them know, you know what, if that woman can do it, I can. If that family can pull through, then so can I, because they did it because our Heavenly Father was batting on that team.
And I appreciate that, because one of the things that we talk about all the time is like, I don't want to come on here and tell you how bad our government is. Like, we're all fully aware of that. No one's confused about what's going on here. We do want our story told because it's important to see what led up to where we are today. But my whole point is hope. I mean, you can be the tiniest little, suburban white chick from Dallas, Texas, and you can go up against the federal government and win. You took on Joe Biden and won. And that's like kind of huge. So if you're feeling like you're in your David and Goliath moment, like just, we said the entire time, just keep the faith, keep the faith. It was kind of just our battle cry the entire time. And it was what they signed off all their text messages to each other when we were going through it, when they were exchanging anything. We would always just say, keep the faith, and we hashtagged it. Like, it was just what we clung to the entire time, because we knew that God was going to redeem it. And then on the other side of that, there would be good.
But let's be clear, you didn't go against the federal government and won, you went against evil.
Yes, we did.
And you won.
Yes, we did.
And because you make a good point, right? Like, the federal government isn't good or evil. People
absolutely
make poor decisions to harm others. We live in a broken world. But this is also a testament to the fact that despite there being evil that exists and demons that absolutely exist, we know and recognize that we are in a cosmic war, right? That spiritual warfare is a very real thing. And God showed you, I have good people who I'm going to send to fight for you.
Yeah, so there's an entire chapter in here about one of those good people, which is Pete Hegseth. So back on his Fox and Friends days, I mean, we were unpopular. This was a controversial issue, and it also wasn't very timely. So the situation happened back in 2007. So by 2014, when they went to trial, everybody's kind of over it. And so the way the news cycle works, you're real familiar. The news cycle works fast, and you got to be relevant. So we had a very, very difficult time getting in any news, and what we needed was for the president to understand the situation and have support, right? So, when I was thinking about it, so I'm a trained project manager, and I'm sitting there, with 4 men in prison, and I'm like, what am I going to do now? And you're looking at your options, and you're like, well, we're not going to solve a political issue with a judicial solution. So I started immediately working on presidential pardons, even though we hadn't exhausted all of our judicial remedies, which we did eventually over the years. We were just kind of running it all in tandem. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, so if you're the president, what do you need to make a decision like this? Well, A, you need to know enough about it. You need to know enough about it to make a confident decision. And B, you need the people around you to know enough about it to support your decision. And because it was so controversial, there was nothing to be gained from anybody. We got connected to Pete Hegseth, and he wrote the book War on Warriors. And this is like his issue, is never leaving a man behind, never treating somebody like they're disposable. I mean, I don't want to put words in anybody else's mouth because I haven't served my country, but I think that there is an expectation that you are expendable, but not disposable. And that was unexpected.
How can people learn more about the book? Buy the book.
Oh my gosh, so you definitely have to get the book because it's a great read. One thing that I actually haven't mentioned yet is that the woman who wrote the book, her name is Gina Keating. She is a liberal investigative journalist from California, no less. Just came to it as a God thing, an 100% God thing, that she ended up, somebody who just like harassed her into covering, into looking into it. And she was so resistant and so reluctant. And then when she looked at it, she just could not look away. And so she ended up doing an entire podcast series. It's incredible. It's like 17, 18 different episodes. So if you want to like dig into the details, and on one of the platforms, they even like linked trial transcripts, linked Hillary's wiki links, like all of these different things. But the book is incredible because she writes it from the perspective of, not necessarily the most likely champion. Sure. So it's a terrific book, and it's written from her point of view, just kind of, walking through and discovering what was completely unexpected to her, and then really criticizing the media establishment for completely failing to do their jobs. And that's something that we see now with the rise of independent media is because the traditional media is not, they're supposed to be kind of anti-government, right?
Yeah.
That's what the media is supposed to challenge our government, not be on the payroll. And so what she found is that she got dropped by her agent, her publisher, her manager. Nobody, her colleagues wouldn't even discuss it with her. And it was a huge journey for her. So the book is terrific. You can find it anywhere books are sold, Amazon. I think it's actually on sale on Amazon right now. So I'm like, go grab it on Amazon, but you can find it in person at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. It was published by HarperCollins.
Love it.
In August. So it's just like kind of brand new. We're brand new baby book people now. We don't know anything about selling books, but we're trying. And it's an excellent read. I kind of expected it to re-traumatize me, and I was like, man, Gina, this is a good book. It's really good.
If people want to get in touch with you guys and get your guidance or your wisdom or pray for you, how can they do that?
I would absolutely love that. You can find us on Instagram at Raven23. You can put Raven23 into Facebook. My name is Christin Slough, Christin Slough. It's the weirdest name, so you'll probably have to look at it in the book or online. But Raven23 is easy to remember, and you can find us on pretty much all platforms if you just search Raven23.
Awesome. Yeah. Pastor Greg, parting thoughts?
Yeah. So Kyle said something earlier about people that need hope, finding it in Jesus through your story. And I think as Christians, one of the toughest things for us is knowing that God is sovereign and in control of all things. The hardest thing for us sometimes is his timing.
Yes.
And you made a comment earlier.
Yeah, the timing is...
He didn't say when.
He didn't say when.
Yeah.
And it took us a long time to get there. And that was, I think, because we were also talking about good people and Pete taking up our torch when nobody else wanted to, and when he was using his own personal time to talk to the president, so the president would call him up and ask him questions, and he would use that time to advocate for us. And when the president decided to pardon the guys, he called Pete. He said, hey, I'm going to pardon your contractors. You can let them know, but let the White House press secretary break the news. And it was surreal. And we got to meet Pete, and he invited us to please, of course. We got to meet Pete recently. He welcomed us up into the Pentagon. We took a tour. It was like a very, very cool situation. And we got to meet Ed Martin, who's wonderful.
Yeah,
My
he's
husband
awesome.
actually applied for a role in his office.
Oh, let's go.
As a legal researcher, because that would be very poetic.
Yeah.
Who knows what will come of that. But even though he doesn't have a law degree, we always kind of joke that we got our law degree from the School of Hard Knocks, and we know more about the law than most lawyers.
Oh,
so
I'm sure.
once you've lived the law.
That's awesome.
I love this quote in here at the beginning of the book. It's out of Romans 12. It says, never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him, and if he is thirsty, give him a drink, for in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. That is such a powerful scripture in thinking about how we always want to take things into our own hands, but remembering that God is in control of everything.
Yes.
And that vengeance is his.
And I kind of giggled to myself because my vengeance isn't near as good as God's. Yeah. So I'm like, you only wish I was in charge of your vengeance, friend.
For sure.
I love it. Hey, thank you so much for flying out.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I'm a little disappointed you didn't bring me some Texas Twinkies from Hutchins Barbecue, but that's okay. We'll break bread when we come out there to you next time. Really appreciate you coming out. God bless you guys for the fight that you've gone through and for how you continue to be warriors for Christ and for our country.
And thank you for everything you do for our first responders. I'm super proud to follow you and support your efforts. You're doing great.
Thank you. Guys, thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for hitting that share button. God bless you all, and God bless America. And again, big shout out to Brawler Creek.
Most homeowners feel safe after locking their doors and setting their alarms. But alarms only alert you once somebody's already inside your home. And your doors, you can lock them, but the most vulnerable part of your home remains completely unprotected: the glass. Unprotected glass can be fully compromised after a single strike, leaving your home exposed in seconds. Glass is often never thought about until it's too late. Clear Armor Residential changes that. We strengthen your home where it matters most. For our installation process, we begin by measuring your glass to ensure an accurate fit and finish, and then we cut the material on site. Once the laminate is prepared for installation, we professionally clean the inside of your windows to ensure an optically clear look once the product is installed. Our team of experienced technicians then install the laminate on your glass with great attention to detail and precision. You're only billed for what's installed on your home, and you're never charged for any sort of wastage. Now, The most vulnerable part of your home is protected and will stay protected without any monthly fees or loss of power. Once installed, ClearArmor safeguards your home 24/7. Backed by a 10-year warranty, you can rest assured knowing your family and property are secure. If you're looking to have your home protected, visit us at clear-armor.com.